Hey everyone, and welcome to our deep dive today.
Yeah.
We're going to be looking at TBI recovery,
Okay.
but with a bit of a twist. We're not just talking about the clinical side of things, but really trying to understand the lived experiences of people recovering from traumatic brain injury.
Oh,
And I think to do that, we're going to kind of go a full-on research nerd here.
sounds fascinating.
It is. We've got a ton of really rich data to dive into.
Oh, wow.
We've got excerpts from these really powerful interviews, some groups, some individual, and then also a bunch of feedback on different rehab programs. So yeah, we're going deep.
I'm excited to dig in.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
One of the things that just jumps out right away from these interviews is the power of shared experience. I mean,
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about it. It's like you're suddenly not alone in this. It's like there's this beacon of light. You know, in one of the interviews, someone described joining a support group, and they said it was like they were not floundering in the ocean alone anymore. And that really hit me. I mean, that feeling of not being alone, of being understood.
yeah, so powerful, right?
Mm.
And then another participant talked about how in these groups, no one's judging and everyone understands.
Right.
And that just creates this amazing safe space for people to connect, to share their experiences and process everything without that fear of judgment.
Exactly. You find your tribe, so to speak. You can be vulnerable, and you're met with empathy.
Yeah.
And that's huge, especially when we consider just how challenging TBI recovery can be.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that reflected over and over in the data.
Absolutely. One of the most common themes that emerged was difficulty with cognitive tasks.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like, we're not talking about just forgetting where you put your keys. We're talking about really struggling to remember recent events, appointments, even conversations.
Yeah, it can be so debilitating. Can you imagine how frustrating that would be?
Oh, totally.
Ah,
And it's not just memory either. There's also this major impact on concentration.
absolutely.
Just imagine trying to focus on anything when your brain feels foggy or you're constantly
Boy,
distracted.
It's exhausting.
It is. It's like trying to run a marathon with a weight strapped to your ankle or something.
Wow, that's a great analogy.
And then on top of all that, there's the emotional dysregulation that many participants described. Like these sudden mood swings, heightened sensitivity to stress.
Yeah, that makes sense, though, right? Given the trauma their brains have experienced.
Well, absolutely. It's totally understandable, but doesn't make it any easier to manage, does it?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
And you've been researching TBI, you probably know this, but emotional regulation relies on very specific areas of the brain. When those areas are damaged, it's no wonder emotions can feel so out of control.
It's true. And it just makes you realize just how intricate and delicate the brain really is and how one injury can have these cascading effects.
It really does.
And then we also see the impact on executive function,
Right.
which, those higher level thinking skills that we need to plan, organize, manage our time.
One survivor put it brilliantly. They said, it's like the brain's CEO is suddenly struggling to make decisions and stay on track. I thought that was such a good way to describe it.
I know, right? It really captures the essence of it.
Yeah.
But you know what I found really inspiring amidst all these challenges was the resilience and adaptability of these individuals. They talked about using these really simple but effective tools to cope with their cognitive difficulties,
Like what?
like calendars, to-do lists, note-taking systems, anything to help them stay organized.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And one person actually described this incredible system they created with different colored sticky notes
Oh, wow.
for different types of tasks. So creative, and it clearly worked for them.
It's all about finding what works for you. Here.
Exactly. And then there was another participant who talked about using this app called Brain Check,
I've heard of that.
which is really cool because it allows you to objectively track your cognitive function over time and even generate these reports that you can share with your doctor.
Wow. So you're really taking control of your own healthcare.
Exactly. And speaking of taking control, another thing that came up repeatedly was this need for accurate, evidence-based information about TBI and its effects.
Makes sense.
Yeah, like they don't want just anecdotal advice. They crave credible knowledge.
Well, knowledge is power, right?
Exactly. And this one survivor said, I feel empowered by knowledge that is evidence-based and research-based. And they even talked about using that knowledge to push back against dismissive medical professionals.
Wow, good for them.
Yeah, it's like they're reclaiming their agency and becoming informed advocates for their own recovery.
And that highlights a really important point, right?
Good.
We need healthcare providers to be well informed about TBI and to approach their patients with empathy and respect.
Absolutely. And of course, we need to make sure individuals with TBI have access to those reliable resources and support systems.
100%. So we've talked about shared experiences, coping strategies, and the importance of information. But let's shift gears a bit and talk about some therapies that were highlighted in the research as being really beneficial.
Okay, like what?
Music and exercise.
Oh yeah, several participants talked about the positive impact of music therapy.
I love music therapy.
Me too. They talked about how it helped them relax, manage their emotions, and even improve their cognitive function.
That's amazing. Music has this power to connect us to emotions and memories, and it's incredible for healing and rehab.
Yeah, one person even specifically mentioned how much they loved listening to Three Little Birds by Bob Marley during their music therapy sessions.
Oh, that's
It's such a great song, right?
Yeah.
About hope and resilience.
Yeah,
And it really resonated with them.
I can see why.
And it wasn't just music, even gentle exercise like walking in place was mentioned as a way to boost both physical and cognitive well-being.
I mean, we all know exercise is good for us.
It's true, but sometimes we forget that it doesn't have to be strenuous to make a difference.
That's a good point. So we've covered shared experiences, coping strategies, access to information, and therapies like music and exercise.
Yeah.
But there's one more piece we need to talk about in this section, the impact of virtual support.
Oh yeah, virtual support has just exploded in recent years.
Especially with platforms like Zoom, right?
Exactly. And the research really shows just how vital it's become for people with physical limitations or those in rural areas where in-person support might be limited.
Right. It can bridge those gaps and create that sense of community.
Yeah, I mean, we heard from several people who wouldn't have been able to participate in support groups or therapy at all without these virtual options.
And what's even more interesting is that despite the physical distance, they still formed genuine connections.
It's true. It's like technology can be the facilitator, but it's that human element that truly makes it meaningful.
That's a great way to put it.
Isn't it?
So we've uncovered a lot of really interesting stuff so far about TBI recovery, wouldn't you say?
For sure. It's been eye-opening hearing from these individuals. But I'm curious to know what happens next. Like, what does the research tell us about future needs and where we go from here in terms of support?
Well, the participants themselves had some really valuable insights on that.
Oh, that's great.
One thing that came up over and over was the need for more breakout room time during the virtual sessions.
That makes sense. You know, those more intimate settings for deeper conversations.
Yeah, exactly. It allows people to share specific challenges or coping strategies and just really delve into the nuances of their experience.
And then there was also this suggestion to introduce small group discussions earlier in the program, maybe even from day one.
Right. It's about creating that sense of community right from the start.
Yeah, a welcoming space where people feel safe sharing their vulnerabilities and connecting with others who truly understand.
And speaking of connection, another great idea that emerged was a buddy system.
Oh, I love that.
To provide that extra layer of peer support outside of the scheduled sessions.
Yeah, it's like extending that sense of community beyond the virtual walls of the program.
Exactly. So you're not alone in this journey.
It's so important. On a more practical level, some participants suggested incorporating those 5-minute breaks into the virtual session.
Sure, just to refresh and refocus.
Which again makes total sense when you consider the cognitive fatigue that can accompany TBI.
It's about pacing and respecting those cognitive needs.
Yeah, even a short break can make such a big difference.
Absolutely. Now, moving beyond these logistical tweaks, there was a pretty strong call for more resources related to sensory sensitivities.
Yeah, that's an important one.
You know how TBI can affect the way the brain processes sensory information?
Right.
Leading to those heightened sensitivities to noise or light touch even?
It's like the world is suddenly turned up way too loud.
Exactly, and it can be overwhelming.
So what kind of resources would be helpful in addressing these sensory challenges?
Well, the participants talked about needing more information and practical strategies for managing sensory overload.
Makes sense.
Things like noise-canceling headphones or sunglasses.
Yeah, those could be helpful.
Weighted blankets even.
Or just creating those quiet spaces at home and in public settings.
Exactly. Just making the world a little more accommodating.
And accessible for everyone.
Right. And beyond the practical stuff, we really need to raise awareness about sensory sensitivities.
Yeah, for sure.
Both within the healthcare system and just society in general.
The more people understand it, the more empathetic and supportive they can be.
Exactly. It's about inclusivity. Recognizing that not all disabilities are visible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, zooming out a bit, there's this huge potential to expand the reach and impact of these TBI programs.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, we've seen how virtual platforms can break down geographical barriers.
But there's still so much more we could do.
Right. Like, what if we could leverage technology to create even more accessible and personalized support?
I love that idea. Think about it. You could have online modules or mobile apps.
Yeah, that provide tailored information and resources and tools.
So someone in a rural community could access all of this amazing support right from their smartphone.
It's all about empowering individuals.
And not just individuals, but building a more supportive ecosystem overall.
Right.
We need researchers, clinicians, policymakers, and of course the voices of TBI survivors all working together.
It's about breaking down those silos and fostering collaboration and innovation.
Exactly. We need to create a world where everyone impacted by TBI has the support they need to live full and meaningful lives.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I can't help but think about how much we can learn from just listening to the voices of TBI survivors.
I know, me too. Their stories are just so powerful. They really give us this incredible insight into the challenges and the triumphs, but also, like you said, the unmet needs that are still out there.
It reminds you that behind all those statistics and medical terms, there's a real person, navigating this complex and often invisible journey.
Yeah, and that journey doesn't end when the initial injury heals. TBI can have these long-lasting effects that impact every aspect of a person's life.
It's about so much more than just physical healing, right? It's about reclaiming your life, your sense of self.
It's about finding a new normal in a world that doesn't always understand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where I think our responsibility as a society comes in. We need to create a more supportive and inclusive environment for people with TBI. And it starts with education.
Absolutely. We need to get rid of the stigma surrounding brain injuries and really try to understand what people are going through.
It's about recognizing that TBI is a spectrum, and the effects can be so different from person to person.
And like we talked about before, not all disabilities are visible.
Right, and we've talked about how valuable those virtual support groups and therapy sessions can be, but access and affordability are still huge barriers.
For sure.
We need to push for policies and funding to make sure everyone who needs these services can get them no matter where they live or their financial situation.
I agree. And we also need to keep investing in research and innovation to find even better ways to support TBI recovery.
And I think even on a personal level, we can all do our part. Just being patient with someone who might be having trouble finding the right words or remembering something.
Yeah. Offer a helping hand when you can listen with an open heart.
Those small gestures can mean the world to someone.
They really can.
So as we close out this deep dive, I hope you're walking away with a better understanding of TBI recovery and a sense of hope for the future.
Me too. It's clear from the research that with the right support, people with TBI can truly thrive.
It's been great exploring this with you, and I encourage everyone to keep learning, connecting, and advocating for a world where everyone impacted by TBI has the support they need.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. Until next time, keep seeking knowledge and keep the conversation going.